You were just a footnote, Nathan hissed across the polished table, his voice slicing through the hush like a blade. I built the empire. You were nothing but a line of code. But outside the courtroom lights, a woman with a broken hair clip and a buried name was already walking back into the shadows, carrying proof that could topple everything he'd built. What happens when the quiet one refuses to stay quiet? Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The cafe on 37th smelled of burnt cinnamon and weak coffee. Steam blurred the window where morning light struggled in. Behind the counter, Clara poured wipe-slid plates movements drilled into muscle, not thought. Mrs. Hester shuffled in cardigan, sagging purse heavy. I had an accounting degree once, she said, voice like paper. Clara smiled faintly, her eyes flicking to the photo taped by the grinder Hester long ago, in a marble lobby beside an empty chair. The bell chimed again. A mailman teased her. One day you'll admit you weren't always just coffee. She laughed too quick, and the sound collapsed almost as soon as it rose. Later in her narrow kitchen, Clara opened the lunchbox she'd carried home. Nestled beside the sandwich lay a silver hairclip hinge, split useless. Her thumb traced the crack. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet. Then faintly from the next room, a voice she hadn't heard in years whispered her name. Clara pressed her palm flat to the counter, breath held. The sound thinned into memory, but the weight of it stayed. And when the clock ticked forward, she did what she always did, pulled on her coat and went to work. The harrow pulsed with the low thrum of money. Glass chimed against porcelain beneath chandeliers that fractured light across the walnut floor. Clara threaded herself between tables like a hush apron, her only shield against polish and judgment. Her movements ran on muscle memory. Napkins squared, salt cellar, leveled glass lifted, while the kitchen's heat pressed at the back of her neck. Delaney Pike watched from the pass, attention sharpened to catch even the smallest misstep. Heels whispered on tile as she approached, words clipped and precise. That's the third stem you've missed. Rothwell's noticed fingerprints. Clara lowered her head, fingers smoothing the serviette. Yes, Delaney. Her reply landed soft like a cup set down gently. The chart flipped. A fingertip tapped. 12. Rothwell. Eloise with him. He's particular. You get the table. Consider it a test. No trace of kindness in the order. Clara accepted the menus and crossed the dining room. Guests glanced up, some curious, some guarded. Table 12 waited beneath a brass lamp, its glow warming the linen. A cane leaned against one chair. A silver-haired woman sat prim and straight. Julian entered, cut to precise dimensions, his coat whisked away by an attendant. Hands accustomed to shaping boardroom deals moved in effortless gestures. His sentences were trimmed to essentials, water room temperature. Bread warm, not hot. Precision in tone as much as in taste. Clara approached with the carafe. Eloise lifted a hand and signed movement, sure. A busboy lingered, baffled. The gestures looked like a private music beyond his reach. Clara stepped closer and signed back her shapes, steady, unhurried, butter or oil. Eloise's expression brightened, and her fingers danced to describe the herb, the memory of Paris in the way she shaped thyme and lemon. The dining room inhaled. Conversations thinned. A server paused mid-stride. Julian's eyes, previously elsewhere, fixed on Clara. The scrutiny wasn't casual, it cataloged, dissected. You learned that where, he asked? Community classes. Night sessions. That's not on your resume, he observed. His tone smooth, yet weight clung to each word. We prefer transparency in our circles. No private histories. She let the comment pass. People carried pasts like coats, sometimes folded away, sometimes dragged through storms. The answer came the way she'd been taught, when truth would only widen the gap. I keep my work separate. Eloise reached across the table, her grip firm, a gesture of welcome. Slowly she signed, don't let them make you small. The hands trembled less than the jaw. From across the room came a cough, a spoon striking porcelain. The moment balanced on the thin edge of fragility. Delaney watched, mouth drawn tight, then turned with a sound that hovered between dismissal and calculation. Plates were lifted, glasses refilled, posture held exact, while the room seemed to measure every fracture in a life. Each step was careful, as though one slip could bend the night into rumor. When the check arrived, it was folded neatly and slipped past the swinging kitchen door. Paper crackled in her grip. Julian had left a tip, thick-folded, impossible to ignore. Beneath the bill lay a card without a name, only an embossed line, "I remember faces that listen." A glance at Delaney revealed nothing. She was bracing, the wine rack expression unreadable. The card slid into an apron pocket, as if it were no more than a receipt. Plates were cleared in silence, stacked with deliberate care, a choreography of restraint. The night thinned into blur. Orders came and went. The card's edge pressed faintly through fabric, a steady reminder. At the supply door, she paused, smoothing the apron fingers, lingering on the crease. Over table 12, the lamp flickered, one shadow stretching long, while kitchen doors swung open and a waiter called for the next course. The back office behind the Harrow's kitchen reeked of damp paper and forgotten lunches. A single fluorescent tube flickered overhead, casting lockers and file cabinets in a pale green wash. She nudged the door open with her shoulder bag slipping from its strap, then froze. Delaney Pike stood at the locker, both hands buried in the canvas tote she carried. "What are you doing?" Clara's voice came out low but steady. Delaney turned slowly, holding up a pair of keys as if that excused everything. "Safety inspection, new policy. Management wants to be sure no one's sneaking things in." Her smile came a fraction too late, practiced rather than natural. She dropped the keys back into the bag with a muted clatter. Clara stepped closer, taking the tote from her. The handles still held Delaney's warmth. "Since when do you handle inspections? Since nobody else bothers." Delaney leaned against the locker's, arms folded. "You're a puzzle, quiet, flawless on the floor." Then suddenly signing fluently to a billionaire's grandmother. Her eyes slid to the corner of a card peeking from a pocket. And now souvenirs. The card disappeared deeper into fabric without a word. Clara folded her apron, smoothing the cloth harder than necessary. Delaney's tone tilted, playful, but a razor edge glinted beneath. "Careful. Half-hidden girls attract stories. Poor waitress, secret skills, powerful man notices. It writes itself. People love believing that kind of tale." The apron slipped into the locker, the door closing with a soft thud. She didn't rise to the bait. Coat over one arm, she walked out. Queens at Night smelled of bus exhaust and fried dough from a nearby cart. Shuttered shops lined the side street she cut through before ducking into a second-hand bookstore. The air was dry, heavy with paper and glue like lecture halls she once knew. She drifted toward the legal shelf, fingertips brushing faded spines. A slim volume toppled from above, pages splayed across the floor. She crouched, lifted it, and found herself staring at a paragraph underlined in pencil: assignment and misappropriation. Patent transfers, altered signatures. The words pulsed with unwelcome familiarity. She slid the book back and left without speaking to the clerk. Home felt smaller than usual. A single lamp cast a circle of gold across the boards. She set down her bag without removing her shoes. On the counter, her laptop blinked with a new message. Subject: Pinnacle Legal. Action required. The email was addressed to an account she'd closed 2 years ago. Attached a patent application. Diagrams were hers, every line, every annotation. But the inventor's name read Nathan Granger. Date stamped from the very month she'd been forced out. A hand rose to her mouth. She sat hard on the rug's edge, the glow of the screen painting rectangles against the walls. From the drawer came an old folder of photocopies and receipts kept against her own promise to burn them. The pages still carried a faint smoke smell from that near fire. She slid the printout into the folder, pressed the edges flat, and buried it at the bottom of the stack. Her hand lingered, nails biting into cardboard, while the glow from the screen flickered across her knees. The refrigerator clicked off. Traffic hissed beyond the window. The apartment seemed to hold its breath as she stared at Nathan's name letters, black, sharp, unforgiving. Rain stitched silver threads against a cafe window nearly too fine to hear. The sky over Morningside Heights sagged heavy, the color of wet stone. Clara chose a booth near the corner, close enough to the glass to blend with the street's rhythm, far enough from the counter to be left alone. The cup warmed her hands. She hadn't taken a sip. Julian entered without fanfare. No briefcase, no assistant, only a weather-worn leather folder tucked under his arm. In the cluttered cafe near Columbia, with its chipped mugs and sagging couches, his precision felt out of place. "You were right," he said in place of greeting, sliding into the seat across from her. "The croissants here are awful." Clara didn't respond with a smile. She watched as he unclasped the folder and spread a neat stack of papers between them. One bore the faded crest of Columbia's economics department, another a patent registration summary. Her name was absent, yet her work stared back her diagrams, her phrasing, her method. I ran a search, Julian continued, smoothing a corner. Filed patents, provisional drafts. The trail wasn't long. The original model for predictive risk calculations, its first inventor, didn't come from my world. But they came from yours. Her eyes fell to the header. She didn't need to read. Memory carried every line thin as veins now. I'm not asking you to confess, he said, his tone calm but deliberate. I want to know why someone who built this a tap on the page is serving Pettis fours and folding napkins. Her throat tightened when she tried to laugh. Is this a job offer? Then she whispered, gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window. A boy on a skateboard coasted past, hood-drenched scarf pulled over his mouth. Julian studied her. I don't need your resume. I'm asking about the gap. The missing years. Why you're hiding behind a wine list. Her lips pressed into a line. She wanted to explain, but theft always sounded like bitterness, betrayal like weakness. I shouldn't have come, she said, rising too quickly. The chair scraped the tile. She turned, leaving her bag on the bench. Clara Julian reached for it, but the door had already swung shut behind her, ushering in a gust of damp air. He looked down at the forgotten tote. A folder protruded, its edge frayed. He hesitated, then drew it free. Inside were printed drafts watermarked 2 years back, when her name had begun to vanish from records. His eyes fixed on a signature. Nathan Granger. The next page held a prototype, rough, incomplete, yet aligned with the patent text. Same structure, same metrics. Nathan had claimed work that wasn't his. Julian leaned against the booth, rain thickening until it blurred the street. The glass fogged with the shift in temperature, as though the building itself shared his unease. Later that afternoon in his office, Manhattan buzzed under cloud-darkened skies. The Rothwell firm stretched across 2 floors of glass and brushed steel. His assistant dropped a heavy envelope on his desk. Merger documents. Nathan signed this morning. Legal wants it fast, no audit. Julian stared at the page. His own signature line waited. Everything aligned, everything ready. He lifted his pen. On the desk, Clara's folder lay half buried beneath a file labeled Pinnacle Review. Nathan's name peeked out again, stubborn, unrepentant. He set the pen down, turning toward the rain-smeared window. Cars below flicked on headlights, though it was barely noon. The city looked older through the weather, slower, more honest. His fingers drummed against the contract, but the ink stayed dry. Behind his eyes, Clara's silence replayed, not the silence of guilt, but of wounds guarded. The chandeliers at the Harrow glowed low, in amber halos softening polished edges. A rain-soaked crowd murmured over oysters and Pinot Noir silverware, tapping like cautious footsteps. Clara lingered near the host stand, scanning arrivals until a familiar silhouette crossed the threshold. Slight frame, silver hair pinned tight, cane-striking marble. Mrs. Eloise Rothwell had come alone. Clara hurried forward, gently offering her arm. Let me take you to your usual table. Eloise nodded, her fingers already moving in sign. Julian is away. Last-minute meeting in Chicago. He didn't want to go. I told him business doesn't wait, but he kept talking about you. Clara steadied a glass at the table. Expression neutral, though something warm stirred beneath her skin. Her reply came slower than usual. He doesn't even know me. The older woman shook her head. He knows enough. Enough to worry. Enough to mention your name twice. Clara tried to avert her gaze, but met the quiet dignity in Eloise's face, gentle, unwavering. She handed over the menu and crouched to help with selections. They pointed at dishes, traded brief smiles over misreadings. For a breath of time, the world settled into an easy rhythm she thought she'd forgotten. Then Delaney appeared, silent as a draft. Her shoes stopped 2 feet behind Clara. I need a word, she said, tone clipped. A crisp envelope extended forward. Clara rose, accepted it, unfolded the page. Notice of temporary termination. Inappropriate personal involvement with clientele. Compromised boundaries with high-value patrons. No sound left her throat. She folded the letter, gave Eloise a single nod, and stepped back. The woman frowned, signing, "What's wrong?" Clara forced a faint smile that never reached her eyes and replied, "Only I'll see you again soon." She left through the service hallway. The metallic door clanged shut behind her. By the time she reached her apartment, the wind had picked up, tossing trash lids, bending shadows against stoop steps. The mailbox hung open, bent out of shape. Her pulse quickened. Amid flyers and damp bills, a single page lay flat. No envelope, no name, just bold handwriting. You're good at encryption. I'm better at disappearing things. Don't make me redo the lesson. NG. The sheet trembled in her grip, though not from the wind. She scanned the street. Empty. A siren wailed in the distance. A car passed without slowing. Clara tucked the note into her coat pocket, climbed the stairs 2 at a time, and locked the door once, twice, a third time. The apartment held its breath. She knelt by the bed, pulling out an old laptop wrapped in flannel. The power button stuck, then clicked. Blue flicker, then white screen. 3 passwords later, a folder appeared buried beneath decoys and misnamed files. It hadn't been touched in 23 months. Emails, drafts, timestamps. Source code, the real proof. She opened one chain, non-disclosure drafts, her annotations still in the margins, versions of the algorithm scrubbed later of her name. The clock read 9:42 p.m. The refrigerator hummed like static. She copied the folder to a flash drive, slid it under her waistband, and leaned back. A text flashed on the screen. Unknown number. Still watching. Her hand didn't shake. She closed the laptop with the care of sealing a casket. Rain slicked the marble steps leading to Columbia's underground archives, humidity clinging to skin and making the walls sweat. Clara descended as though she belonged, neither hurried nor hesitant, coat zipped halfway, hair tucked beneath a cap. The security camera above the stairwell blinked red once, but no alarm followed. It wasn't courage that had brought her here, only necessity. Forgotten stories clung to the stacks, paper glue mildew, and a faint metallic tang from old shelving. Nearly 2 years had passed, yet every row seemed to murmur her name, a refrain she had tried to bury. Past the faded law journals and engineering dissertations, beyond the brass cart where she once shelved alumni donations, she found the section etched into memory: special academic deposits, restricted access, drawer 4C. She tugged it open. The folder she needed should have read Winfield Clara, Financial Risk Predictive Modeling. Draft with notes 20XX. Instead, a fresh sticker covered the tab, clean and institutional. Transferred Granger Capital Research Division. Her stomach tightened. She thumbed through the binder, finding her old charts, polished now, corporate-ready, stripped of annotations. Colored graphs she had once printed on a student budget had been professionally re-rendered. Her equation, her algorithm, was there, footnoted in small text that led nowhere. At the back of the binder lay a photo she hadn't known existed. She and Nathan standing after her defense. Her hand clutched the edges of her presentation folder. His arm circled her waist too tightly, chin tilted like a man already claiming victory. She remembered how her shoes pinched that night, how she hadn't realized his grip hurt until later. Her stare fixed on the photo. She didn't blink. Then her fingers ripped it down the center, letting one half fall to the concrete. The other she shoved into her coat pocket, chest tight. Her phone buzzed. "Julian back in New York. Need to see you at 9 tomorrow. If not, I move forward, no waiting." Not a request. Clara lowered the phone slowly. The message echoed in her chest like water filling a sealed jar, quiet, pressing, inescapable. Beyond the archives, the world still slept. Dull light flickered in the narrow hallway as she made her way to the elevator. She walked like someone revisiting a past she hadn't chosen and couldn't outrun. What would it mean to step back into this, to unearth every proof and put her name beside it again, knowing the scale of the machine she stood against? Nathan hadn't just stolen an idea, he had stolen her voice, her future. But what did hiding offer her now? A part-time uniform, a broken hair clip, a stack of unread books, and a woman in a quiet apartment still whispering apologies in her sleep. The elevator waited, doors ajar, with an indifference that made her hesitate. She stepped in, pressed the button for the ground floor. It lurched, once began to hum upward. The lights flickered. She braced against the wall, breath shallow. 2 floors passed. Then everything cut, movement, glow sound. Darkness wrapped the cabin. No creak, no buzz. Only dense stillness, like a tomb sealed shut. Her breathing slowed, deliberate. No panic, no scream. She reached into her coat pocket and found the torn photo thumb, brushing the jagged edge where Nathan's face had been. Beside it, the flash drive shifted cold familiar. 2 years ago, she thought burying it had been safest. Now trapped in a motionless metal box beneath her former life, it felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. The sky over Hudson Yards looked washed out as if morning itself had been diluted. From the top of the vessel, the city below moved in muted tones. Silver buildings, gray sidewalks, glass catching pale light. Everything felt suspended. Clara stood near the rail of the observation deck, one hand gripping the folder, the other buried deep in her coat. Each breath rose in pale clouds, dissolving into the cold. She didn't turn when Julian arrived. He offered no greeting. She extended the folder without a word. He loosened the flap and began to read. Pages whispered as they turned. First one, then another. His gaze moved quickly, scanning, halting now and then, as though a line stirred memory or confirmed suspicion. A breeze tugged at her coat hem. Far below, a horn blared. Halfway through, he stopped. His thumb lingered on a page marked with her original handwriting. Clara recognized the margin notes' ink faded, but not enough to hide the night she'd written them under lamplight, too tired to see straight, yet too restless to sleep. Still reading, he spoke. My mother kept a folder like this. Only hers held chemo schedules and insurance denials. Clara's jaw tightened. She ran a clinic. Small place. 2 exam rooms, a receptionist who brought pies on Fridays. Another page turned. She trusted her partner with the accounts. He left town one morning, took every cent. She found out when the landlord changed the locks. The city carried on below taxis, inching past vendors, joggers, weaving through commuters. But up here, the noise drained away. Julian finally lifted his eyes. She was dying then. Still apologized to her patients. Said she wasn't strong enough to protect what she'd built. His voice wasn't sharp. It had been worn smooth by years of carrying grief. I was 20. No savings, no case to bring. Just rage. And a memory of someone who deserved to be remembered for healing, not for dying in debt. He closed the folder. I won't let your work be erased. A gull drifted overhead, wings cutting the gray. Clara stared at the river past the rooftops, eyes glossy but steady. Then she nodded, one a small certain. Julian's phone buzzed. A flicker of tension crossed his brow as he glanced at the screen. He didn't show her the message. Granger Capital contract finalized. All legal inquiries on hold. Minimum 18-month delay. He locked the screen with a flick of his thumb. It'll be hard, he said, but worth the wait. His tone carried something new, not the polish of the restaurant, not the edge from the cafe. Something slower, personal. Clara pushed the folder back toward him. Keep it. You'll need every page. He tucked it under his arm without protest. They stayed there a while, the city hushed around them. Neither noticed the lens across the way. One discreet camera, red light blinking behind glass, capturing the exchange. The nod, the pause. 2 figures meeting in a moment too fragile to last. Clara descended the winding stairs first. Julian followed the file, clutched tight mine, already sorting timelines, contracts, names. At street level, the world resumed horns. Elevator bells, Monday's hum. They didn't speak, didn't touch. Just one glance, quick and unreadable, before the city folded them apart again. The conference room on the 38th floor seemed to hold its breath. Walls of glass framed a city smothered by low clouds, steel pressed hard against the sky. Only the faint click of a pen broke the stillness. Julian stood at the head of the table, tie-loosened sleeves, pushed-up palms, braced on polished oak. Across from him, the legal team sat, hunched, tension stitched into every collar. A single projection glowed on the far wall, a wire-frame diagram of a predictive financial model, sterile blue against the gloom. Run it again, he said. The intern at the laptop tapped a few keys. The schematic shifted, replaced by an earlier patent draft, Clara's. Nearly identical. 90% overlap. A woman with silver-framed glasses leaned forward. If this hits court and that folder leaks, we're not just looking at avoided merger. We're looking at systemic liability. Personal liability. Julian's jaw tightened. Another man, thinner face drawn from too many nights in fine print, added, any association with Rothwell will be read as willful blindness. The optics are catastrophic. The word hung in the air like a weight. Julian didn't respond. He let his gaze drift through the glass past the blurred skyline toward the faint outline of the vessel. Clara's name still blinked in his inbox unread like a quiet alarm. He hadn't answered her last two messages. One lawyer cleared his throat. Do we need to consider proactive distancing? Julian looked at him once, then switched off the projector. The answer was understood. Elsewhere, a phone buzzed on a kitchen table. Clara's. She glanced down hopeful. Not Julian. Another client canceling. She sat alone, laptop open, but untouched coffee, long cold. Shadows from the afternoon rain stretched across the floor, swallowing the edges of her apartment. She reread her last message to Julian. Still delivered. Still blue. Was he shielding her or himself? The doubt settled like dust across a once clean room. She paced to the window, arms crossed. From here, the city looked indifferent. Too big to notice her. Too fast to wait for truth. Then the chime of a news alert. Nathan Granger's face filled the screen, smiling, polished suit, flawless under studio lights. Behind him stood a row of men in gray and women in jewel tones, a press conference choreographed to the breath. Granger Capital, he began smoothly, has always believed in innovation, independent in-house innovation. His gaze flicked to the camera, rehearsed warmth edged with contempt. We have never collaborated with any unnamed or unofficial partner. Any suggestions to the contrary are unfounded. A pause measured, deliberate. Unfortunately, we are aware of certain individuals, some with histories of financial misconduct, attempting to undermine this company with fabricated claims. He never spoke her name. He didn't need to. The broadcast cut to a still image, a grainy security frame. Clara's silhouette beside Julian at the vessel, her hand extended, a folder visible. Caption leaked footage suggests possible under-the-table exchange. Her stomach lurched. She leaned closer to the screen, breath uneven. The angle high, invasive, just enough to distort. Her face blurred, but not enough. Anyone from the Harrow would recognize the coat, the streak of silver in her hair clip, the bag on her shoulder. They had turned a moment of courage into accusation. Her hands trembled as she shut the laptop. Rain battered the windows harder, streaking glass with crooked lines like someone trying to scratch their way in. She backed away, bumping the table. A fork clattered to the floor. She left it there. Behind her, the apartment seemed to contract, walls closing in when she wasn't looking. Across town, Julian stood in the hallway outside the conference room, phone in hand, thumb hovering over her name. He typed. He deleted. Typed again. Still didn't send. Downstairs, wind funneled through steel canyons, rattling doors, stripping umbrellas, swallowing answers. Julian drove north with both hands gripping the wheel as if loosening might turn him back. The road to Westchester curved through early autumn trees, their colors muted beneath a silver sky. Clouds carried just enough weight to press the world quieter, heavier. The assisted living home sat on a low hill, red brick softened by ivy and time. At the entrance, the smell of boiled carrots and soft jazz drifted through the hallway, familiar and faintly sad. He signed his name at the front desk, asked for Eloise, and followed the nurse's quiet gesture toward the common room. She sat near the window, hands folded, eyes tracking the light as it slid across the floor. The small wool blanket on her knees had slipped to one side. Julian knelt to fix it. I saw you coming, before the rain, she signed, without turning her head. He gave a faint smile, settling into the chair beside her. You still shake when you try to look calm, she added, lifting a hand toward his. Julian paused, fingers suspended mid-sign. I'm just tired. Eloise studied him a moment longer. No, she replied. You're afraid. His hands dropped into his lap. They're using it, he murmured. Clara's model, her work. Nathan's passing it off as Granger's original IP. And now there's footage of her and me at the vessel, circling investor networks. Already a weapon. Eloise signed slowly with the deliberate patience that always made him feel young. You knew this might happen. He leaned forward, elbows pressed to his knees. My mother lost everything because her partner kept quiet. She trusted him until the bank locked her out of her own office. His words barely rose above the hum of the vent. I swore I'd never be that man, he admitted, staring at his palms. But I think I've been becoming him. Eloise reached into the side pocket of her chair, pulled out a single butterscotch candy, and set it in his hand like a prayer. When people stop apologizing, she signed, they start confessing with their hands. Your grip betrayed you before your guilt did. He pocketed the candy, letting her words sink in. The phone buzzed against his hip. He hesitated, then answered. Julian Nathan's voice came smooth, confident. I hear you've been busy, visiting family, visiting the past. Julian said nothing. I like that about you, Nathan went on. You're sentimental. Just don't let it turn into weakness. This thing with Clara, it can still vanish quietly. We talked tonight. Whitney rooftop. No press, no pressure. Julian turned toward the window. Beyond the trees, a flock of starlings twisted like unraveling thread. You don't want this to become a story, Nathan warned, his tone hardening. Think the board will trust you if they believe you're sleeping with a waitress while leaking tech secrets to her? I'm not sleeping with her, Nathan chuckled. Doesn't matter. All they need is the photo, and it's already moving. Silence stretched. Then Julian asked, why did you take it? What her work? A pause, a rustle, the shrug in Nathan's voice. Because I could. The line went dead. Julian lowered the phone. His hand trembled more visibly this time. Eloise, watching, laid her palm over his. What now? She signed. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his briefcase and drew out a manila folder, its pages marked with red tabs and highlighter. The contract. It reeked faintly of recycled ink and dry ambition. Paper crackled as he turned to the final sheet where his name waited above a blank line. He stared at it for a long time, then pinched the corner and tore. The sound ripped across the quiet like cloth splitting in a hushed chapel. Not the whole page. Just enough. Enough that the scar would always show. The kettle whistled in the background, shrill and lonely. Clara stayed by the window. Rain scattered against the glass like hurried footsteps, and the only light came from the bulb above the sink, flickering every few seconds as if undecided. When the knock came, it wasn't loud, but it wasn't timid either. A rhythm that unsettled her pulse. She opened the door. Julian stood there, coat damp at the edges, collar loosened, eyes dulled. In his hand, a folder sealed with a paperclip warped by moisture. Didn't expect you, she said flatly. I didn't expect to be here. She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered quietly, setting the folder on the kitchen table, as though it might detonate if moved too quickly. Clara remained by the door, arms crossed. You want tea, no? Good. I wasn't going to make any. He opened the folder, revealing the affidavit, the same one she had submitted to the university's ethics committee 2 years ago, the one erased from every archive. Where did you find this offline backup? A friend in compliance owed me. Her fingers hovered but didn't touch. Why bring it here? I thought you deserved proof it still exists. I know it exists, she replied. I lived it. Julian drew in a breath. Nathan's moving to close the deal without scrutiny. He's invited us to a strategic session at his office. Clara arched a brow. Us? He pulled out a folded note, Granger's personal invitation. It was typed impersonal, bare of courtesy. Just time, place, and one line. Bring whoever you think can back your doubts. Or don't. Clara dropped it on the table. He's daring us. He is. And you're thinking of walking in. I am. She studied him. Why? Because silence is how he wins. The truth struck deeper than she wanted to admit. She turned off the kettle without glancing at it, steam rising like the last breath of something long extinguished. You think showing up in his office changes anything? I think it forces him to say your name, out loud, in a room built to erase you. Clara picked up the affidavit, flipping to the page where her initials curled beside a diagram she once drew, half blind from fatigue, too restless to sleep. Julian watched, hands sunk in his pockets. He'll bait you, she murmured. I know. He'll twist everything. I expect nothing less. And when he does, what happens to me then? Julian's voice stayed steady. Then we make sure the room hears both sides. The pause stretched between them. He slid out his laptop, showing a confirmation from Granger Capital. Subject: final integration session. Attendance required. Beneath it, smaller print: private conference. No recording, no legal representatives. A trap, she whispered. Yes, but traps only work if you walk in blind. Her gaze drifted toward the mirror above the coat rack. The dim glow caught the faded scar near her temple. She brushed it lightly, not to hide it, but to test if it was still part of her. Julian noticed. He said nothing. She inhaled slowly. If I walk in, I'm not there to beg. I know. I'm not there to remind him who I was. You don't have to. She nodded once. No speech, no gesture. Just folded the invitation and slid it into her coat pocket. Julian didn't try to reassure her. He simply watched the way one watches a storm gather, not with fear, but with respect. After a beat, she took her keys, pulled on her boots, and opened the door. The hall was dark, but she stepped forward without hesitation. Julian followed. The door clicked shut behind them, final and quiet. Clara and Julian entered the glass-walled conference room. A long table gleamed under sterile LED-strip shadows, falling sharp as blades. Every surface was too polished, too still, more like an operating theater, waiting for something to be cut open. The kettle whistled in the background, shrill and lonely. Clara stayed by the window. Rain scattered against the glass like hurried footsteps, and the only light came from the bulb above the sink, flickering every few seconds as if undecided. When the knock came, it wasn't loud, but it wasn't timid either. A rhythm that unsettled her pulse. She opened the door. Julian stood there, coat damp at the edges, collar loosened, eyes dulled. In his hand, a folder, sealed with a paperclip warped by moisture. "Didn't expect you," she said flatly. "I didn't expect to be here." She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered quietly, setting the folder on the kitchen table as though it might detonate if moved too quickly. Clara remained by the door, arms crossed. "You want tea?" "No." "Good. I wasn't going to make any." He opened the folder, revealing the affidavit, the same one she had submitted to the university's ethics committee 2 years ago, the one erased from every archive. "Where did you find this offline backup?" "A friend in compliance owed me." Her fingers hovered but didn't touch. "Why bring it here? I thought you deserved proof it still exists." "I know it exists," she replied. "I lived it." Julian drew in a breath. "Nathan's moving to close the deal without scrutiny. He's invited us to a strategic session at his office." Clara arched a brow. "Us." He pulled out a folded note, Granger's personal invitation. It was typed impersonal, bare of courtesy. Just time, place, and one line. "Bring whoever you think can back your doubts." "Or don't." Clara dropped it on the table. "He's daring us." "He is. And you're thinking of walking in." "I am." She studied him. Why? Because silence is how he wins. The truth struck deeper than she wanted to admit. She turned off the kettle without glancing at it, steam rising like the last breath of something long extinguished. "You think showing up in his office changes anything?" "I think it forces him to say your name, out loud, in a room built to erase you." Clara picked up the affidavit, flipping to the page where her initials curled beside a diagram she once drew, half blind from fatigue, too restless to sleep. Julian watched, hands sunk in his pockets. "He'll bait you," she murmured. "I know. He'll twist everything. I expect nothing less. And when he does, what happens to me?" Then Julian's voice stayed steady. "Then we make sure the room hears both sides." The pause stretched between them. He slid out his laptop, showing a confirmation from Granger Capital. Subject: final integration session. Attendance required. Beneath it, smaller print: private conference. No recording, no legal representatives. "A trap," she whispered. "Yes, but traps only work if you walk in blind." Her gaze drifted toward the mirror above the coat rack. The dim glow caught the faded scar near her temple. She brushed it lightly, not to hide it, but to test if it was still part of her. Julian noticed. He said nothing. She inhaled slowly. "If I walk in, I'm not there to beg. I know. I'm not there to remind him who I was." "You don't have to." She nodded once. No speech, no gesture. Just folded the invitation and slid it into her coat pocket. Julian didn't try to reassure her. He simply watched the way one watches a storm gather, not with fear, but with respect. After a beat, she took her keys, pulled on her boots, and opened the door. The hall was dark, but she stepped forward without hesitation. Julian followed. The door clicked shut behind them, final and quiet. Clara and Julian entered the glass-walled conference room. A long table gleamed under sterile LED strip shadows, falling sharp as blades. Every surface was too polished, too still, more like an operating theater waiting for something to be cut open. Nathan arrived precisely 1 minute late. A junior IT associate, barely older than a college student, approached without raising his eyes. He placed a small flash drive on the table wrapped in a yellow sticky note with one word scrawled in block letters, original. Julian gave a single nod, slipped it into his jacket, and the young man vanished as quickly as he appeared. Clara stayed motionless. In the adjacent office, they connected the drive to Julian's laptop. No password, just a single file dated 2 years ago, stamped by Columbia's internal system, then forwarded to Granger Capital's archive. Clara leaned forward as the playback began, grainy footage from a security camera angle, high and cold. There she was. The recording showed her by a server cabinet. Nathan entered, speaking quickly, waving papers in her face. Then in one practiced motion, he shoved the stack into her arms, blocking her view as his other hand slipped something from her laptop into his pocket. The video didn't capture everything, but it captured enough. Clara sat back slowly, palms pressed flat against her thighs. No tears, only the measured rise and fall of breath. I used to think survival was enough, she murmured. Julian leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. You didn't just survive. Her eyes stayed on the screen. You rebuilt. He paused before adding, you scared him. That's why he's still reaching. She gave the smallest nod. Men like Nathan, they don't fear courtrooms. They fear exposure. Julian's phone buzzed against the desk. A notification from legal counsel glowed across the glass. He swiped red once, then again. Turning the screen toward Clara, he let her see. From Granger Legal Team, subject notice of legal action to Clara Winfield et al., content as of 4:35 p.m. Granger Capital has filed suit against Clara Winfield for defamation, misappropriation of proprietary data, and breach of non-disclosure agreements. A formal summons will follow. Clara shut her eyes briefly. A muscle jumped in her jaw, but her shoulders stayed loose. Julian spoke carefully. They're aiming to drain you with fees. Stall the process. Keep investors waiting. I know, she replied. It isn't about winning, it's about wearing me down. He crossed to the window, arms folded, staring across Manhattan as gusts rattled the glass. The sky had dulled to metal, the pain groaning faintly in the wind. Clara remained at the table. Fingers tapped a soundless beat against her leg, then stilled. A knock, firm, deliberate. They turned together. Two men stood at the doorway. Not uniform patrol, but plainclothes financial crimes division. One flipped a badge toward Julian out of courtesy. The other addressed Clara. Miss Winfield, we need you to come with us. A formal complaint has been filed. You're not under arrest, but will require a statement. Julian stepped forward, instinct sharp. Clara's glance stopped him. She rose calmly, lifted her coat, and turned back toward the officers. Give me 30 seconds. They exchanged looks, then allowed it. Facing Julian, her eyes carried something unreadable. Don't follow. Just finish it. He opened his mouth, but no words arrived. Clara walked past, the click of her boots fading into the carpet. A current of air caught her coat at the doorway, lifting the edge like a flag before the door closed behind her. Julian stayed rooted. On the desk, the flash drive blinked once, red light pulsing like a heartbeat. The waiting room of Rothwell's legal division reeked faintly of disinfectant and dry carpet, sterile, impersonal, designed to press thought flat. Clara sat upright, palms against her thighs, shoulders drawn back as though posture alone might anchor her. Two officers flanked her. Neither spoke. One tapped his boot on marble in steady rhythm. The other stared forward, unmoved, as though the entire scene belonged to routine. She'd stopped checking the clock after the fourth glance. Time didn't move here. It circled, hung, then a sharp click, heels on tile. Measured, slow, confident. She raised her head. Mrs. Eloise appeared in the doorway, draped in a dark wool coat scarf tucked beneath her chin. Her cane tapped lightly, faint yet impossible to ignore. She wasn't alone. A tall man in his 60s followed, silver hair combed back with meticulous care. His presence carried quiet authority. Clara recognized him from headlines and televised hearings, even without a formal introduction. Retired Judge Daniel Myers. Julian trailed after them, suit, slightly wrinkled, expression hard to read. In his hand, a manila folder and something taut in the set of his jaw. Mrs. Eloise stepped closer, stopping just before Clara. Without words, she raised her hands, fingers trembling only slightly. You once did it for love, she signed with deliberate care. Now do it for justice. Something caught in Clara's throat. Not pain, not fear, just something unspoken, finally acknowledged. Julian stood beside her, lifting the folder. This is a new sworn statement, he told the officer on her left. From James Linwood, lead software architect at Granger Capital. He was pressured to forge development logs, threatened with visa revocation if he refused. He's come forward. The officer opened the folder, brows rising as he scanned the first page. Julian continued, voice low but steady. You'll also find internal communication from Granger's legal team. They reference metadata scrubs, silence witnesses, and a campaign to brand Clara as hostile. And the video, asked the second officer. Julian pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Security footage from Granger's sub-level access bay, 2019. You'll see Clara being escorted out after alerting her supervisor to data inconsistencies. Not hacking, not sabotage, whistleblowing. One officer inserted the drive into a laptop. As the screen lit, Clara's heartbeat thudded once, then leveled. There she was, shorter hair, thinner frame, standing in the corridor as Nathan's assistant barked at her. Two men approached, ushering her away. No struggle, no crime, just resignation. She never entered the server room, Julian added. The entire breach story was fabricated. The officers exchanged a glance. One muttered, "This changes everything." He turned back to Clara. "Ms. Winfield, given the new evidence, you're no longer required to remain for questioning. You're free to leave." The words took time to settle. Clara rose slowly. Her knees held, though her fingertips curled around the strap of her bag, anchoring her. Mrs. Eloise gave her one last look, strong, unwavering, proud, then stepped aside. Julian didn't speak. He only watched steady, neither asking for thanks nor expecting forgiveness. Just present. Clara crossed the marble floor toward the elevator. The hush of the room clung like a second skin. She pressed the button. A soft chime answered. The doors slid open. She stepped in, turned slightly, her reflection staring back from the brass panel. For an instant, she almost looked behind her. Almost. The doors closed with a gentle hush, cutting off the room. Yet for the first time in years, she didn't feel confined. She felt released. As the numbers blinked downward, her breath steadied, grip loosened, and something long buried began to shift. She hadn't won. Not yet. But someone believed her. And this time she wouldn't walk out alone. The courtroom's modern design did little to ease the strain. Bright white LEDs hummed overhead, throwing a surgical glow across glass-topped tables and brushed steel chairs. Screens flickered on the walls, poised for evidence. Cameras blinked red in quiet corners, feeding the proceedings live. Clara sat motionless in the third row, her back straight, fingers curled around the old silver hair clip in her coat pocket. It pressed into her palm, reminder anchor. Julian stood near the witness box, a thin folder tucked under one arm. He didn't glance at Clara. He didn't need to. The wordless rhythm between them had become fluent. Nathan Granger entered, flanked by lawyers, each stride deliberate. A navy tie knotted to perfection swayed slightly with his movement. He offered the judge a nod as if greeting a business partner at lunch. "Call to order," the clerk announced. The judge inclined his head. "Proceed." Nathan's counsel rose, first tone, smooth, precise. "Your Honor, we request a delay to review newly submitted evidence." Motion denied, the judge cut in. "We've postponed enough. Begin." Julian stepped forward, placing a tablet on the podium. A tap, and the screen behind him lit with a familiar chain of emails. Headers, timestamps. Nathan's own words, stark and damning. From N. Granger to legal counsel. Granger Capital subject. Reattribution documents. Make the metadata match. Ensure the draft has no trace of her work. This version needs to be airtight. A ripple passed through the gallery. Reporters leaned closer. Nathan's expression tightened. Julian kept his gaze fixed. "Mr. Granger, you testified that no such draft existed. Care to explain this directive?" Nathan chuckled dry. "Emails can be fabricated." Clara rose without prompting, her voice steady. "True, but servers don't lie. Your IP logs put you in the system at 2:17 a.m., the night the original vanished." The silence that followed pulsed. Nathan waved a dismissive hand. "We had agreements." She signed a release. Another click. A forged contract filled the screen. Julian gestured toward it. This signature, lifted from her debit card application filed a year earlier. Identical strokes, identical smudge on the end. "Our forensic team found the vector file. You didn't even flatten the layers. Gasps scattered through the gallery. The judge's gavel remained still. Clara drew a deeper breath. I never wanted this fight. I left. I tried to disappear. But I won't let silence be the legacy of my work. Nathan shot to his feet, voice cutting sharp. You think this will ruin me? I built an empire. You were a footnote. Not anymore, she replied. Two officers moved in, quiet but certain. No order given, yet the shift was inevitable. They positioned themselves by Nathan's chair. You have no grounds, he barked, jerking away. This is theater, Julian remained composed. He held up another sheet, an affidavit from a former Granger engineer, signed sealed, corroborating Clara's claim. As the officers took Nathan by the arms, his protest drowned beneath the shuffle of cameras and reporters scribbling furiously. A nation was listening. Julian returned to the bench. The judge gave him a single approving nod. I hereby withdraw Rothwell Industries from all partnership considerations with Granger Capital, Julian declared, and I request this court pursue further legal action based on today's disclosures. Clara stayed in the back row. The clip in her hand pressed a faint imprint into her palm. Her breath at last evened. Not relief, not triumph, only certainty. The lie had cracked, and somewhere behind the white lights and polished arguments, a door had finally closed. Autumn leaned gently over the Hudson that afternoon, the wind carrying secrets it didn't know how to tell. A faded checkered cloth stretched across a picnic table corners, anchored by sweating iced tea glasses and a woven basket lined in linen. An old cassette radio played Moon River, its notes thin and crackling, like a memory trying to hold. The bench creaked under Julian's weight as he adjusted the volume thumb, turning the knob until the melody dipped, faltered, and found its way back. He didn't lift his eyes when Clara stepped into the clearing. Her coat was a muted forest green, shoulders dusted faintly with leaves. Her hair for once wasn't tucked beneath a hat or pulled into a hurried knot. It fell loose until she clipped it back with careful fingers. The same fingers that had years ago scribbled formulas into a notebook no one had read. Julian slid a small velvet box onto the table between them. No flourish, no speech. Just the box, deep blue square, unassuming. Clara didn't reach for it immediately. Her gaze lingered on the water where late sunlight caught the ripples and stretched them long, like threads unraveling across the river's skin. Somewhere a fairy's horn called out low and distant. When she finally opened the box, she didn't gasp, didn't blink. Inside was no diamond, no ring. Only the old silver hair clip, the one that had cracked down the middle years ago and sat at the bottom of her drawer since. Now its broken hinge had been soldered with a sliver of gold so thin it caught light like a secret. Julian's voice cut through the hush. I didn't come to ask you to stay, he said, hands folded loosely on his lap. I came to ask if when you start over, from the ground, from ash, from nights without light, if I could be the one beside you while you do it. The river rustled. Leaves whispered overhead. Somewhere nearby a child laughed and then disappeared again into the quiet. Clara lifted the clip from the box, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and fastened it into place, firm whole. No tremor, no slip. She didn't turn to him, not right away. Her words when they came weren't a yes, not even a decision. They carried something smaller, softer. Something like healing. I used to think accepting anything meant owing something, she said, eyes on the river. But maybe this time I get to keep without debt. A pause followed, not waiting for a reply, only holding space. Julian didn't reach across the table, didn't try to soften the quiet. He let the weight of her words settle, half smiling with something closer to reverence than relief. They stayed like that as the sun dipped its orange edge, brushing the horizon like a hand smoothing creases. The river turned gold, shimmering like a scar, long faded, yet never erased. The cassette player clicked softly. The tape had run out. Neither moved to rewind it. They simply let it end. Chapter 16. Quiet like justice. No cameras, no microphones, no swarm of reporters at the courthouse steps. Only the wind cutting through the granite corridor of the Federal District Building, sweeping between pillars as if it too was relieved the noise had passed. Heels tapped in steady rhythm along the floor, measured, deliberate. The world wasn't watching anymore. It was moving forward. 3 months had passed since the trial. The sentence came without spectacle. Nathan Granger, guilty of financial fraud, document tampering, and intimidation of witnesses. No plea deal, no polished press release, just the verdict and the soft rustle of papers as the gavel fell. Julian stood behind glass in the observation wing suit, darker than the marble expression unreadable. When asked about Rothwell's standing, his reply was simple. All partnerships with Granger Capital are terminated effective immediately. Rothwell has no further business with entities under investigation. He didn't stay for the closing formalities. The real decision had already been made. Fall deepened. Trees along the square burned amber and red. Pigeons scattered with each gust. No press vans, no flashbulbs. Just quiet. Clara hadn't attended sentencing. Weeks earlier, she had signed documents transferring her algorithm's rights to a nonprofit she quietly co-founded. No ribbon cutting, no gala, just a modest release and a bare-bones site, Winfield Foundation, for quiet voices. Its mission. We protect innovation born in silence and overlooked by power. The internet found it anyway, not through headlines, but through a 42-second clip from the trial. Clara at the podium, hands steady, eyes not on the judge, but somewhere beyond. Her voice soft but firm. I'm not standing here for revenge. I'm standing here for everyone who was told to sit down and stay silent. The clip spread slowly, forums, Slack channels. Newsletters passed between interns and engineers. The old image of Clara and Julian at the vessel resurfaced, filtered grayscale, captioned, "You don't need a mic to be heard." Julian saw it once scrolling late at night. He didn't save it, didn't react, just stared before switching off the light. Meanwhile, Clara moved on. Not far, just enough. No more night shifts. No more hiding notebooks at the back of drawers. She still visited Mrs. Hester on Tuesdays, bringing lemon tea, wiping dust from the old radio. Sometimes they sat in stillness. Sometimes they laughed about nothing. She never returned to her old apartment. She didn't need to. Some places outlived their purpose. Her new space was smaller, higher, brighter, more windows, fewer shadows. One morning an envelope arrived with no return address. A single page lay within. "I saw a girl today on the subway. She was practicing ASL against the window's reflection. Her hands moved like they believed someone was listening. I thought of you." She never replied. But when the Winfield Foundation received its first request for support from a young deaf coder in Portland, she wrote the approval letter herself. No signature, only one line centered at the bottom. "Every silence has an echo if you wait long enough." And so it continued, not with triumph, not with noise, but with motion, quiet, steady, chosen. The rooftop garden wasn't large, just enough for 30 chairs, 2 trellises wrapped in dried eucalyptus, and a table where iced lemonade sweated under the sun. Rosemary and fresh linen lingered faintly. From behind the short curtain, Clara glimpsed the city breathing hazy, slow, alive. No violin, no grand entrance, only the click of a cassette player found in a thrift shop. Moon River, a little warped with age, but tender still. Julian waited at the center, not in a tuxedo, but a blue shirt with rolled sleeves, black shoes polished more carefully than he'd admit. He wasn't nervous, just still. Beneath the arch of paper cranes, Mrs. Hester occupied the front row, tissue already in hand, wide awake. Beside her, Eloise smiled, hands folded, eyes following each motion, though the world remained quiet to her. Clara stepped forward, not rushed, not hesitant, simply moving on. Her dress was plain, light gray, tea-length, borrowed from a friend at the library. In her hair, the silver clip gleamed again, its hinge catching sunlight. No longer broken. When she reached Julian, he didn't extend a hand. Instead, he whispered, "I thought about writing a speech." She raised a brow. "But then I realized," he added, "you already know everything I would have said." Her smile was small but certain. A friend from the nonprofit, ordained just for this, began the briefest of ceremonies. No readings, no quotations. Only a question. "Do you choose this person, knowing they come with history and not promises?" Julian answered yes. Clara replied, "I choose him because he doesn't ask me to erase what made me." Some guests teared up. Others chuckled softly. Then came the box. Not for rings, but the same velvet case Julian had used once before. Within again rested the silver hair clip, its hinge now engraved, barely visible, except when the light found it. On it, 2 words, "Still here." He clipped it into her hair himself, not trembling, not showy. They didn't kiss right away. They stood together, letting the moment breathe, letting the air be filled not with clapping but stillness. The reception was sandwiches, lemonade, and a stack of old photographs pinned to a corkboard. Among them, a blurry snapshot of the Harrow's kitchen, a photo of Clara teaching in the library, a scanned version of her first sketch for the financial model creased and tea-stained. Julian stayed close but didn't hover. Eloise had brought a tiny notebook and wrote 3 words for Clara. You spoke loudest. Clara pressed her hand over hers gently. Later, as the sun tilted west, a girl from Clara's class arrived late. She had a small hearing aid and carried a folded paper crane. She handed it to Clara. It's from all of us, she said. We made one for every day you didn't give up. Clara unfolded it carefully. On the page, written in 12 different handwriting styles, was the same sentence. Thank you for staying. As the sky began to blush, Julian and Clara stood near the edge of the rooftop. No plan for honeymoon, no dramatic exit. Just the hum of traffic below and a breeze playing with the hem of her dress. He leaned close and murmured, "Where to now?" Clara didn't answer right away. She looked out at the skyline not to escape, but to witness it. Anywhere, she said, as long as we don't hurry. They left hand in hand, no applause behind them, but the crane swayed in the wind as if bowing, and the radio forgotten on the table played a final note before the tape ran out. Clara's journey isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming the space to stand, speak, and create without apology. Her fight shows that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a steady presence, a repaired hinge, a voice refusing to be erased. Carry this with you every time you see someone silenced or overlooked. Remember that the smallest act of acknowledgement can be the first brick in their bridge back to themselves.